It all started with a quiet announcement that soon shook the entire country music world. The news came early in the morning. Jeannie Seely, the beloved singer, had passed away at the age of 84. No one was expecting it. She hadn't made any public appearances in recent months, but no one thought it was anything serious. The headlines spread fast. Radio stations across Nashville stopped their regular broadcasts to play her biggest hits. Fans from all over the country took to social media, sharing their favorite memories of Jeannie's music. For many, she was more than just a singer. She was a voice of strength, resilience, and beauty in the heart of country music. As the news reached artists and musicians, a wave of silence and heartbreak covered the industry. The Opry family, where she had performed for decades, issued a statement calling her an irreplaceable legend and a beautiful soul. Her passing didn't just feel like the end of a life, it felt like the end of an era. In the last few months of her life, Jeannie Seely quietly stepped away from the spotlight. She didn't make any formal announcements, and there were no media updates about her health. But those close to her noticed a change. She had stopped performing at the Grand Ole Opry every weekend, something she had never missed unless absolutely necessary. Friends said she spent more time at home, surrounded by her favorite things: old records, photo albums, and handwritten letters from fans collected over the years. Jeannie had always lived with quiet dignity, and even in her final days, she chose peace over attention. Only a handful of close family members and dear friends knew she was facing health complications. Even then, she didn't want sympathy. She still smiled, cracked jokes, and talked about music like she always did. In her last days, she asked for no big fuss, no public statements. Her only request was that people remember her with a smile. And that's exactly how those around her did, holding on to her grace, her kindness, and her strength right up until the end. Jeannie Seely's journey in country music was nothing short of legendary. From the moment she stepped onto the stage in the 1960s, there was something unforgettable about her voice, soft but powerful, full of feeling and truth. Her breakout hit, "Don't Touch Me," wasn't just a song. It became an anthem for countless women who found their own voice through her music. Over the years, she became a trailblazer, not just for her songs, but for how she carried herself in a male-dominated industry. She wasn't afraid to wear what she liked, speak her mind, or stand up for other women. That courage earned her respect from legends like Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, and Loretta Lynn. But perhaps her most enduring contribution was her long-standing presence at the Grand Ole Opry. For over 50 years, she graced that stage, mentoring younger artists, cracking jokes backstage, and always delivering heartfelt performances. Fans didn't just love her music, they loved her. Her personality, her fire, her kindness. Jeannie didn't just make country music, she helped shape it. And as the world began to process her passing, stories of her generosity, her humor, and her legacy poured in like tributes to a queen who had touched everyone she met. As the news of Jeannie Seely's passing settled in, the country music community came together in a way that hadn't been seen in years. Plans for her funeral began almost immediately, but this wasn't going to be an ordinary service. This was for Jeannie, a woman who had given her whole life to music, who had stood by others in their darkest times, and who had left behind a legacy worth celebrating. Her family, along with close friends from the Grand Ole Opry, worked day and night to plan a farewell that truly reflected her spirit. The funeral was scheduled to be held in Nashville, at the historic Ryman Auditorium, where Jeannie had performed countless times. Invitations went out to country legends, rising stars, and longtime collaborators. Everyone who had ever shared a stage with her felt it in their heart to attend. From dressing rooms to tour buses, the talk was all about Jeannie, what she meant to people, and how no tribute could ever truly capture her essence. Floral arrangements began arriving, fan letters were displayed in the lobby, and a seat in the front row was draped in a golden scarf she once wore on stage. This wasn't just a funeral. It was a reunion of generations, gathered to say goodbye to one of the brightest lights country music had ever known. The day of the funeral, As people quietly took their seats and music played softly in the background, a hush fell over the crowd when Bill Anderson entered the building. Dressed in a dark suit with a small white rose pinned to his lapel, he walked slowly down the aisle, his eyes filled with both sadness and memories. Bill and Jeannie had shared a bond that spanned over 5 decades, recorded duets, and supported one another through life's ups and downs. For him, this day wasn't just about saying goodbye. It was about letting go a piece of his own story. As he passed by familiar faces, musicians, old friends, younger artists who had admired them both, many stood silently, nodding with deep respect. He took a seat near the front, close to the casket, and held his head low for a few quiet moments. Though he had spoken at many funerals before, this one was different. Jeannie had always been there, even in the hardest seasons of his life. And now he was here to honor her in the best way he knew how, not just with words, but with music that came straight from the heart. It was clear to everyone present, this goodbye was personal. When it was time for Bill Anderson to take the stage, the entire room fell into complete silence. He slowly stood up, holding a single sheet of paper and a gentle smile that barely hid the pain in his eyes. As he walked toward the microphone, he paused for a moment beside Jeannie's casket, placing his hand gently on it, whispering something only she could hear. Then he turned to face the crowd, cleared his throat, and said softly, "This isn't just a tribute. It's a song she left behind, without even knowing it." He then began to sing a song he had written just days before, one that seemed to capture everything Jeannie had been, her strength, her grace, her laughter, and her quiet goodbyes. The song was called "The Light Still Shines." Its lyrics told the story of a woman who never chased fame but earned it, who gave more than she took, and whose voice still lingers in the silence. The entire room was still. No camera flashes, no shifting in seats, just tears, deep breaths, and the soft sound of Bill's trembling voice. With every line, it felt as if Jeannie herself was speaking through him. The final verse ended with the words, "Though the curtain has closed, the melody stays." And as he finished, he lowered his head and stepped back, letting the last note float into the room like a prayer. There was no applause at first, just silence. The kind that wraps around you when something too beautiful has just ended. Then slowly, the crowd rose to their feet, one by one, in quiet unity. It wasn't just a standing ovation. It was their way of saying thank you, not only to Bill, but to Jeannie herself. As Bill Anderson stepped down from the stage after his emotional tribute, the room remained frozen in time. For a moment, no one moved. There was only silence, a deep, sacred kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. People sat still with tears in their eyes, some holding hands, others clutching tissues or gently wiping their cheeks. It was as if everyone was afraid to speak, fearing that even a whisper would disturb the beauty of what they had just witnessed. Jeannie Seely had always connected with people through emotion, and now, in her absence, she was doing it once more. Then, slowly and quietly, someone in the back row stood up. A few seconds later, another, and then another. Soon, the entire audience was on its feet. No clapping, no cheering, just standing. Heads were bowed. Hands were folded. This was a moment of pure respect, a silent ovation for a woman who had given her life to her art and left a part of herself in every note she sang. It wasn't just Bill's song that moved them. It was the memory of Jeannie herself. Her voice, her smile, her spirit. In that moment, it felt like she was right there among them, reminding everyone that real music never dies, and neither do the people who sing it from the heart. After the service had ended and the guests slowly began to leave, the room grew quiet again, this time with the kind of stillness that comes only after final goodbyes. Most people had stepped outside, hugging one another, sharing stories, and wiping away tears. But inside, near the front of the hall, Bill Anderson remained seated, his eyes fixed on Jeannie's casket. No one disturbed him. They knew this was a moment only he could fully feel. After a few minutes, Bill stood up and walked slowly toward the casket. He wasn't carrying a speech or a song now, just memories, He placed his hand gently on the edge of the casket, his fingers trembling slightly. "You always knew how to take the stage," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "And you sure knew how to leave it." He stayed there for a long while, not needing words. The silence between them said more than any song ever could. These weren't just the final moments of a funeral. This was one friend saying goodbye to another, a friend who had shared dressing rooms, road trips, laughs, and late-night talks about life and music. Bill finally reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small photo, one of him and Jeannie from the early days, laughing backstage. He tucked it gently beside her and nodded. "This stays with you." Then, without looking back, he slowly turned and walked away, his shoulders heavy. Love and memories they had created together. In that quiet, private moment, the world outside faded, and only two old friends remained, one resting, the other remembering. As the sun began to set over Nashville that evening, a small group of younger country artists gathered outside the venue. They had all grown up listening to Jeannie Seely, some from their parents' record collections, others from YouTube videos or old Grand Ole Opry broadcasts. For them, she wasn't just a name in country music history. She was an inspiration. One by one, a few of them spoke quietly to reporters and fans who had remained after the service. A young female artist, barely in her 20s, said with tears in her eyes, "If Jeannie hadn't stood tall back then, women like me wouldn't be holding guitars on this stage today." Another shared how he once met her backstage as a teenager and was stunned that she took the time to listen to his demo tape and offered gentle advice. "She didn't act like a legend," he said. "She acted like a mentor." They spoke about how she broke barriers not by force, but by simply being herself, bold, kind, and true to her sound. One young singer remembered how Jeannie always stayed until the end of a show, clapping for even the smallest names on the bill. "She taught us that country music isn't just about singing," he said. "It's about standing with each other." Though Jeannie Seely was no longer physically present, her spirit had clearly been passed down. Through these young voices, her voice would continue. Her courage, her grace, and her belief in the power of a song now lived in the next generation. It was clear. Jeannie hadn't just left behind records and memories. She had planted seeds in the hearts of those who would carry country music forward. As the day came to an end and the lights inside the Ryman Auditorium began to dim, there was one final moment planned, a goodbye that would bring everyone together, not in sadness, but in strength. A few close friends and fellow musicians stepped onto the stage holding guitars, fiddles, and microphones. There were no fancy effects, no grand speeches, just raw, honest music. Together, they began to sing a song Jeannie Seely had loved deeply, "Will the Circle Be Unbroken?" The audience, still emotional from the day, quietly joined in. Their voices, soft, shaky, but full of heart, rose together as if Jeannie herself had called them to sing one last time. Even those who had never met her felt the pull of the moment. It wasn't just a song. It was a promise. A reminder that even though she was gone, her music, her message, and her soul would carry on through the voices of others. As the final verse ended, a quiet voice from the back, an old Opry member, spoke the words that Jeannie herself once said after another artist's funeral. "The show must go on." It echoed gently through the hall, not as a way to move on quickly, but as a tribute to how Jeannie had always lived, strong, steady, and deeply in love with the music. And with that, people stood once more, not in mourning, but in unity. They weren't just saying goodbye to Jeannie Seely, the singer. They were honoring Jeannie Seely, the fighter, the friend, the foundation of country music. Her microphone might be silent now, but her voice would live on, etched in records, remembered in hearts, and carried in every country song that dared to tell the truth, just like she always did.